What's up everybody, it's Raccoons. Today I will be reviewing a new action platforming game from Goodfeel called Bakeru. As a raccoon myself, I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't review easily the most fun and probably the best raccoon game of the year. But what makes Bakeru such a great time? Before we get started, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content from Raccoons Hideout. Goodfeel as a studio are most notable for creating 2D platforming games with Nintendo, like Kirby's Epic Yarn and Yoshi's Woolly World. While they aren't affiliated on this project, Bakeru feels in line with the kind of quality and polish you'd expect from a first-party Nintendo title. Keen observers will already be picking up on the Ganbare Goemon influences, and you'd be 100% correct. Bakeru is a spiritual successor to that franchise. The characters and gameplay aren't one-to-one copies, but the cutesy interpretation of Japanese folklore, quirky humor, and giant mecha battles are all here. And it makes sense. The president of Goodfeel and this game's producer, Etsunobu Ebisu, was the original creator of Goemon after all. Otogi Katsugeki Mamada no Bakeru, Orakuru Saitaro no Sainan, originally came out in November 2023, and at the time we weren't sure whether it would be released overseas at all. Nobody on planet Earth bought Goodfeel's last game, Monkey Barrels, except for me, and there was virtual radio silence on a Western release. Fortunately, on September 3rd, 2024, Bakeru was published over here by Spike Chunsoft on the Nintendo Switch and Steam. Now, I personally played the game on PC, but I was hesitant to at first. PC ports of Japanese games have a poor track record, and Goodfeel's experienced in development for the Switch. But I'm happy to report that Bakeru's PC port is excellent. The game looks great, has various options for texture quality, render distance, and uncapped frame rate, and has no frame pacing issues from my experience. From what I've seen, the Switch version suffers from long load times and heavy slowdown in large areas, which a relatively modern PC rig shouldn't have issues with. You also have the option for keyboard and mouse controls if you're a psychopath, but the game plays best on controllers. Go with PC if you have the choice. Our story begins on a stormy night when Sun, an inchling from the Isun clan, is being chased by the forces of evil. Our plucky protagonist Bakeru helps her escape in the nick of time. We learn that a twisted festival is touring around Japan, led by the evil Oracle Saitaro. Bakeru's grandpa then sends us out to seek the aid of the three fairy tale heroes, using the Haradaiko drum to cleanse all the evil spirits that stand in his path. The combat controls in Bakeru are fairly unconventional. Essentially, using either the left or right shoulder buttons will allow you to attack with either the left or right drumstick, and using both at the same time attacks with both drumsticks. You'll have to decide based on the situation whether you want to alternate swings to chain kills on small enemies, or if you want to combo a big enemy by attacking with one bumper. You can also charge your attacks, which can be useful for taking out a large group of foes at once. As far as your defensive techniques go, pressing right trigger pulls up your drum shield, which will block attacks from the front for a short while. I didn't use it nearly at all though, instead opting to parry, which reflects attacks and projectiles if you shield with proper timing. This is especially handy for these kendo guys that lunge at you with a fixed pattern, and for the projectile shooting enemies. Bakeru's combat is simple and feels intuitive as soon as you start playing. It's not a hard system at all, but it's just deep enough to keep you engaged throughout your whole adventure, especially when tougher enemies start showing up later. Overall, Bakeru isn't that difficult of a game, but that's okay. It's a ton of fun recklessly plowing through enemies, then dodging out of any messy situation you get yourself into. Oh, I almost forgot to mention the dodge roll. By pressing X, you can roll out of the way of danger, but if you time it right, you're given the opportunity for a follow-up attack. I'm mixed on this, as it rewards a well-timed dodge with a free opening sometimes, but there's also situations where it leads you to taking damage while you're stuck in the follow-up pose. By holding the dodge roll button, you'll run, but you can also use the dodge roll to peel out into a jump, which is your fastest method of traversal. I love it when games have a slightly more optimal way to move from point A to B. My zoomer ass needs to be pressing as many buttons as possible to satiate my ADHD, and the levels can be pretty expansive, even if they're linear in design. Bakeru's levels are just delightful, and absolutely a highlight of the game for me. There's about 60 of them, and every one has unique elements and design to make them all stand out from one another. Bakeru might not be the most graphically intensive game in the world, but the amount of care they put into packing the levels with rich detail and personality more than make up for it. Whether it's trekking through the cold to arrive at an onsen, avoiding 3 million deer while strolling through a pleasant autumn forest, or running across the deck of a party cruise ship, there's no shortage of memorable locales in this game. Comparisons have been made to Mario or Kirby or Goemon, of course, but the length of the stages, the hidden collectibles, and occasional non-linearity reminded me a lot of Splatoon's levels. The enemies in Bakeru are cutesy takes on real-life yokai and other Japanese cultural characters. From the common Hyotoko mask guys to the rolling Dharma, the kendama kickers, and the fearsome Oni, Bakeru's cast of mooks are pretty lovable. There's a lot said about environmental storytelling in games, but these little enemy patterns are a really unique way to do it. Some enemies beeline towards you with murderous intent, but many are just milling about enjoying the festival, getting hassled by other enemies, working little carnival stands, etc. I like these octopi who cling on to kites and walls, but can also be found lying down on the ground. While Bakeru takes place in a fantasy version of Japan, the levels are based on real-life prefectures and landmarks. For example, Lake Biwa is located in the Shiga Prefecture, so the level there is a high-speed boat race. Or the ornate castle level in Hyogo Prefecture is where Himeji Castle resides. I wonder what's going on in Hiroshima. Bakeru eventually finds each of the 3 fairy tale heroes, but they're all cursed by the festival's evil magic, so you've gotta go beat them up before they'll hear you out. Bakeru's boss fights are pretty good. It's fun to learn the parry timing so you can absolutely go to town on their health bar. All of the heroes end up being too busy to help you out, but offer to give you the license to transform into them for a short while. Tanuki in Japanese mythology were said to have massive transformation magic abilities, and that's represented here in the form of the Henge mechanic. You press left trigger and you can use one of 4 different transformations until the bar depletes. Kintaro's gauntlets are excellent for doing damage to large enemies, and Urashima Taro's fishing rods can do incredible amounts of spread damage to enemies at range. I didn't use Momotaro's guns very much because it kind of felt outclassed by the fishing power in range, damage, and spirit regen, and Isun's tiny power is only used for utility whenever you see a tiny gap in the stage where a secret may be found. Speaking of, each of the levels are filled with a bunch of different collectibles to find. There's 3 pieces of memorabilia in each stage, which are related to the prefecture you're playing in. There's local food items, pennants, toys, and all sorts of fun junk. You can also find Scoop, a yellow poop-looking fellow who will dispense random Snapple facts to you 5 times in a level, if you can find him. For example, did you know that the chairs in a science classroom don't have backs to make it easier to escape in case of a fire? Or that the colors of a hydrangea flower depend on the pH level of the soil? Or did you know that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated by the FBI? My favorite collectibles, though, have got to be the Tanuki that are hidden in some levels. They can take the form of any random object in this stage, but they'll have some small feature to distinguish them, like a mask or a striped tail. Some of these are pretty easy to spot, others are downright diabolical. I recommend trying to hunt them down without a guide. At various checkpoints, you'll also encounter the shopkeeper Umiko, who will sell you recovery items and health upgrades. Tanuki are notoriously avaricious animals, so make sure to buy the Lucky Cat item when you're about to play a section with a lot of enemies to be able to afford all the upgrades early. I also took the speed power up on nearly every level, but that's just personal preference. Along the main path of each level, there are 5 lanterns, and you have to break 3 of them to unseal the giant drum tower at the end of the stage. Hit the drum to fill the bar to the top, and you've completed a level. After locating the fairy tale heroes, your next objective is finding and stopping the evil festivals across Japan by recruiting the help of the 7 Nanakusa girls, who can banish the evil with their sacred ceremony. Yeah, this plot isn't anything mind-blowing, but the dialogue writing and characters are endearing enough to carry the occasional dialogue scene. Bakeru's grandpa then shows up with the Bunbuku, a teapot-shaped airship and the crown jewel of the Tanuki clan. This is where the game opens up, allowing you to tackle stages in a region in any order that you'd like. You can also enter the airship, talk to various Tanuki you've recruited, view your collectible stash, and even buy some cosmetic masks with in-game currency. They're all super cute. I particularly love the big-nosed Tengu mask. Transportation isn't the only thing the Bunbaku is useful for though. When a giant enemy appears, it will transform with this cool Super Sentai style animation into a fighting mech. These battles are appropriately cinematic and feature a different combat system that's closer to something like a fighting game. You're less maneuverable here, so block enemy attacks and wait for your opportunity to strike, then spend your super meter to JoJo's that sucker. These start very easy, but by the end, you need to be confident in your mech piloting abilities to defeat your foes. Pro tip for speeding up these encounters, your fastest forward movement is by alternating punches. Movement with the dodge is very slow. Use it purely to get out of the way of mid-range attacks. The mech levels are just one way Bakeru switches up its main platforming gameplay. There are also these vehicle segments with brow speed, this red cube dog looking guy. You save his sister from the weakest enemies once, and he's indebted to you for life. He can transform into a car, a sled, or a jet ski in these racing levels. They're baby easy, but also cathartic to play and serve to break up the game's pace nicely. Slightly more involved are the few rail shooter segments. They're also not hard, but I sometimes had trouble picking up the depth of the bullets, which occasionally messed up my dodging. Bakeru's soundtrack is great as well. You've been listening to it the whole time. The songs blend traditional Japanese and big band instruments into very catchy arrangements, sort of like Sakuna of Rice and Ruin. Now for the big question. Who would I recommend Bakeru to? For starters, fans of Nintendo games will find a lot to love with the polished, charming presentation and gameplay on offer. As a bonus, you don't even need to give your money to Nintendo to enjoy this one. Fuck 'em. If you enjoy PS2 era mascot platformers, this will very likely scratch that itch for you. Bakeru's fairly lax difficulty made this a cozy game for me to play after a long day of work. I think kids would dig this game too. Bakeru can be played at a very slow pace if you want, and there are few moments where reading is necessary or it's unclear on what to do. It might even be a fun introduction to Japanese culture for them. And if you've ever said, man, I wish gaming companies still made AA games with less scope and budget, I think you owe it to yourself to support this kind of game when they come out and they're good. I should reiterate, we almost didn't get this game in the West due to perceived lack of interest. It's part of a concerning trend of really interesting Japanese games being left untranslated because it's too risky to release in today's competitive market. We've been spoiled over the last couple years with the localize everything mentality, and I don't want to see that come to an end. With that, I hope you enjoyed my review of Bakeru. The game is an absolute blast, and I hope you'll give it a shot if anything in this review piqued your interest. Let me know what you liked about this review and what I can improve on for future videos. Peace out, everybody.